In December of 2014, Como News reported the tragic death of Scarlett Taylor. Scarlett was sent home by her school, Fawcett Elementary, because she had a fever or seemingly just the common cold. Like any mother would do, Scarlett brought her home, had her rest on the couch, and gave her a dose of Tylenol. After 2 days of being home, Scarlett was sadly not recovering. Her mother asked if Scarlett could breathe, to which she replied no. Immediately, Scarlett was rushed to the nearby hospital. While at the hospital, the doctors reported that Scarlett's lungs had filled with fluid and she had developed pneumonia. The doctors did everything they could to save the little girl's life, but sadly they could not keep her vitals stable. 4 hours after arriving to the hospital, Scarlett passed away. It was released by the medical examiner that she had died from H3N2, which is a strain of flu. It was also relieved that Scarlett had never received the flu shot. If only her mother had chosen to give her the flu shot, she could still be here, living her life and playing with her brothers and sisters. The topic of vaccines is one of the most controversial issues in modern time. And that is why today, my name is Savannah, and I will be talking to you about preventable diseases and why vaccination is the answer. Before we move on, 2 limitations must be set. 1, we will only be discussing vaccines in the United States because, of course, we live in the United States, and our medical field is handled differently than other countries. 2nd, we will only be discussing present times other than when we discuss the history of vaccines, because right now our medical field is up to date. So the first vaccine and disease we look at is the smallpox disease. This was first discovered by Edward Jenner, and he noticed that milkmaids who got cowpox, which is a form of pox, did not get smallpox. So to his curiosity, he inoculated a boy with cowpox fluid and to see if a reaction would occur. And to his amazement, a small blister appeared, but nothing too severe. A few days later, he used that same boy and inoculated him again, but there were no symptoms or no blisters. And so in 1776, he was credited with creating the vaccine. And then according to the World Health Organization, in 1980, the disease was eradicated. This smallpox vaccine would later go on to be the background for multiple vaccines throughout the entire world. Next, we have the polio vaccine. This mainly affected children in the 1900s, and what it did is that if it were to get into the bloodstream and then get into the nervous system, that is where it caused its paralysis in young children. In the 1950s, around 25,000 to 50,000 cases were reported, according to an article by called Jonas Salk and Sabine. Moving on to 1952, over 3,000 deaths and 21 cases of paralysis occurred, and of course, mainly children, but some adults. Luckily, in 1955, that all changed when a man named Jonas Salk, pictured on the screen, created the vaccine. Rates dropped by over 80%. And then in 1960, Albert Sabine created the live virus vaccine for polio. So there were 2 types, the OPV, which is the oral, and the IPV, which is the inactivated. In 1979, polio was declared eradicated. However, children around 2 years old can still get the IPV, which again is the inactivated vaccine. Then we have the measles. Before the measles vaccine was around 3 million children got it, and as seen on the little boy pictured on the screen, it can cause a very irritating skin rash, and not just the face or the chest. More than likely, that little boy has measles covering his entire body. It can then turn into blisters, and it is highly, highly contagious. In 1963, a man named Maurice Hillman is credited with the creation of the vaccine. And then in 1971, a 3-in-1 vaccine was released called the MMR, measles, mumps, and rubella, was released, and the number of cases dropped between 22,000 to 75,000 cases after the MMR vaccine was released. the CDC then declared measles eradicated. However, in 2019, around 900 cases were reported. And if you look on the graph, between 2010 and 2013, it was at an all-time, it was low. However, in 2014, which we will discuss later on, it rose to 667 cases because people decided not to vaccinate their children. Then it dropped back down, and like I said, in 2019, that number rose again because sadly people were not vaccinating their children. Lastly, we have the chickenpox. Before the invention of the disease, around 4 million people got the disease. Around 10,500 to 13,000 people were hospitalized. However, in 1972, Michiaki Takahashi developed the vaccine, and luckily in 1995, that vaccine came to the US. Hospitalizations dropped by over 2/3, and between 2000 and 2006, researchers estimated that over 50,000 hospitalizations were prevented because of the creation of the chickenpox vaccine. And the chickenpox vaccine is found to be 98% effective because, of course, no vaccine is 100% effective. Today, we will be discussing why vaccinations are the answer because, one, they provide self-protection, two, they provide the protection of others, and three, it is morally and biblically correct to get vaccinated. So first, we look at vaccines providing self-protection. One, vaccines reduce the risk of pertussis, or commonly called the whooping cough. It is a highly contagious disease that mainly affects young babies after they are born. Since 2014, nearly 100,000 babies have gotten pertussis, and that number can rise each year. Of course, that number would be higher if nobody got vaccinated, and if everyone decided to get vaccinated, that number could disappear. Next, it reduces the risk of cancers, such as hepatitis B and cervical cancer. Hepatitis B is an infection of the liver and is the main cause of liver cancer. It can be fatal. However, it is treatable with a vaccine. So once again, you are taking that preventative measure to get vaccinated and prevent yourself from getting hepatitis B or getting liver cancer. And then human papillomavirus, commonly called HPV, is also treatable with a vaccine. And HPV causes 90% of cervical cancer. However, again, if you take that preventative step, you're taking a preventative measure to not get cervical cancer. The next way that vaccines provide self-protection is, one, the ingredients that are placed in a vaccine, and secondly, the testing that a vaccine must undergo. There are 4 main ingredients which are included in a vaccine, and one is antigen, which makes antibodies to fight off harmful organisms that are trying to enter our body. Next is adjuvants, which help make the immune system stronger. And then aluminum salts, which is an adjuvant. And a fact about that is aluminum salts have been used for 70 years. And if it was found to not be safe nor effective, it would have been removed a long time ago. And the last common ingredient is formaldehyde, which kills bacteria. Now, some ask, is this the same formaldehyde that is used in the preservation of dead bodies? Well, in fact, it is. However, it is found to be safe and effective because the amount never goes over 0.001 milligrams, and your body naturally produces more formaldehyde than is placed in a vaccine. Then we have the testing stage. First is the exploratory stage, where researchers and scientists gather ingredients to be placed in different vaccines. Then you have the preclinical studies, which is tested on either animal, host, or animal tissue. Then you have the clinical trials, which has multiple steps included in it. First, it is tested on 20 to 80 people. Then it is tested on hundreds of people. And then the last step is to be sent off to the Food and Drug Administration, or the FDA, for their additional tests. And if and when it passes the FDA's test, then it can be administered to people. And of course, the monitoring does not stop there. FDA officials and researchers go to manufacturers to make sure that everything is running smoothly and that the vaccine is still safe and effective to be administered to people. So even with this substantial amount of evidence, some may argue that vaccines cannot provide self-protection because, one, the flu vaccine is found to only be effective from 3 or 4 strains of the flu, even though there are multiple strains. And that if the vaccine doesn't match the current strain that is going around that particular flu season, that there is little to no benefit possibly seen from the vaccine that is being administered. And that it is not as effective with H3N2, which back in the story is what Scarlett died from, and it is a type of flu strain. However, in response to this, if you get vaccinated, your symptoms will be less severe. You're taking that preventative step, so you might still get sick, but you won't be near as sick as that if you didn't get the vaccine. And your body knows how to fight off viruses. And so if it recognizes similarities in a particular strain, it will recognize those similarities in another strain. Your chance of being hospitalized or going to the ICU is low because, again, your symptoms are less severe. And then Zach Moore, a North Carolina epidemiologist, said that pregnant women who got the flu vaccine decreased their risk of hospitalization as well. Next, we have that vaccines protect others, such as children or people who cannot get vaccinated, such as pregnant women, children who are too young, or people who cannot mix their medications. First off, it protects children at school. According to the Department of Health, chickenpox cases occurred in 90% of children who are 10 years old or younger. And a child's immune system may be weak naturally or just may not be adapted to the different viruses that have gone around. And so therefore, they depend on people around them, older kids or teachers, to get vaccinated in order to protect themselves. And a 2016 article by McCarthy stated that all 50 states have vaccine requirements to enter school. Now, they will not put these requirements in place unless there was a valid reason or unless it was important, which it is. People need to get vaccinated. However, some people are not vaccinating their children because they can get away with it by using exemptions such as personal, religious, or medical reasons, according to vaccine exemption laws. And then next we have herd immunity, which is almost all are immune to a particular disease, and that is helpful for the kids who are 10 years old or younger who depend on vaccines, or pregnant women, as stated earlier. And Romina Lipster, an Argentinian researcher, stated that the vaccinated are like a protective shield. To achieve herd immunity, one needs to get vaccinated. The percent of people who are vaccinated is the threshold. If the threshold is too low, diseases will come back. Therefore, people need to get vaccinated to increase the threshold to protect the others who cannot get vaccinated. According to Lipster, again, and Kedney, people who take meds cannot mix certain medications and certain vaccines that are being administered at that same time. And then according to the CDC, children who are 6 months old or younger should not get the flu vaccine. And once again, going back to pregnant women, according to vaccine awareness and research, pregnant women should not get the chickenpox vaccine because it increases their risk of pneumonia. People may argue by saying that vaccines cannot protect other people because vaccines, in fact, make people sick. They can have side effects such as headache, chills, fever, or vomiting, and even have an allergic reaction. So some may say that one cannot protect another because they are sick and therefore they're not being able to do their job by protecting others. However, your body actually does the complete opposite. Vaccines are administered to make the immune system stronger. They're used to help boost the immune system and to fight off those harmful organisms or harmful viruses that are trying to enter our body. According to an article by Benjamin, vaccines make the immune system stronger. Vaccines are vital to help boost the body's immune system by stimulating the form of antibodies which fight off organisms, and therefore leading to fight off harmful organisms in the future. So if your body recognizes that this is a harmful organism, it will be able to fight off harmful viruses or organisms in the future. Lastly, we have why you should get vaccinated, because vaccines are morally and biblically correct. This can be found in 1 Corinthians 6:19-20, which states, "Or do you not know that your body is a temple of the Holy Spirit within you, whom you have from God? You are not your own, for you are bought with a price, so glorify God in your body." So what God is saying there is that our body is not our own, and we need to glorify God by putting not holy stuff, but putting healthy stuff into our body. And like we discussed earlier, vaccines are safe. They're not harmful to your body. So one way that you can glorify God and also keep yourself protected is to get vaccinated. Then we have Mark 12:31, which states, "The second is this, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. There's no other commandment greater than these." When somebody gets vaccinated, they're choosing to protect somebody else, and therefore they are loving somebody else as God commanded us to do in this verse. If you're not vaccinated, then you're putting yourself at risk and another at risk, which is going against what God has commanded us to do, which is to love others. In response to this, some people say that they do not want to get vaccinated because of religious reasons or safety concerns, or that God has simply not commanded us to get vaccinated. We mainly look at the Amish community for this, and according to AmishAmerica.com, the Amish believe that people should not get vaccinated because it is putting faith in man over God. A 2013 article by Mersick stated that 60 cases had occurred in religious communities, and those were disease outbreaks. And then according to an article by Bellows, in 2014, a huge measles outbreak, which we saw on the graph earlier, occurred in an Amish community. In response to this, it should be said that everyone is born with a moral code, and everyone knows a sense of right and wrong. You know that by using those two verses stated earlier, that God has commanded us to protect ourselves and to love others and protect others, so you should get vaccinated in order to follow God's commands. And in response to the Amish community, you are putting your faith in man over God, but you're also not putting your faith in God, that He has given man the ability to produce preventative measures for people to take. So what we have seen today is that Scarlett Taylor, the girl in the opening story, could still be here if her mother had chosen to get her the flu shot. Vaccines provide self-protection from different cancers, and they are completely safe because of the ingredients and the testing that they must undergo. They also protect others, such as pregnant women, children who are too young, or simply cannot mix medications. And as seen in 1 Corinthians and in Mark, it is morally and biblically correct to get vaccinated. I'll leave you with this quote by Ezekiel Emanuel that says, "Childhood vaccines are one of the greatest triumphs of modern medicine. Indeed, parents whose children are vaccinated no longer have to worry about a child's death nor a child's disability from whooping cough, polio, tetanus, or any other harmful infections." Thank you.
So, this corona thing kind of fell right in your lap with this topic, didn't it?
I didn't say my disclaimer about that.
Yeah.
It kind of, yeah.
Yeah. That's a great job. So this people who might have a religious objection to it, you kind of touch on that. How do you reconcile that? Because at some point you're almost saying, well, your interpretation of what your religion says is not right. Is it a judgmental thing, or I mean, how do those two issues reconcile in your mind?
I mean, I think like the Amish, like they believe in God. I mean, from what I know, like off the top of my head about the Amish community, they believe in God and everything. But when they make that statement about, you're putting your faith in man, well, yeah, you are, but you're also hopefully trusting that God gave that man an ability to help us take preventative steps. And so if that answers your question, like I think that
Yeah.
they're like, they're not thinking of the overall picture. They're just thinking that, oh, we're flat out, you're not trusting God if you get vaccinated. And that simply, in my mind, that doesn't make sense because in one way, you're not trusting God. And so I think they're too quick to like make a judgment about that. And they're simply just like blaming man for wanting to get vaccinated, if that makes sense.
It makes sense. Yeah. Good.
So Savannah, I just want to compliment you. I really appreciate the fact that you had slides so I could follow along, and it helped me in summarizing what you've already said. So that was great. I also want to compliment you on your delivery. You said or probably less than 10 times in your whole speech, which is fantastic. So as far as the arguments that you made, tell me which one of those three arguments you would say is the most important and why.
I think my first one, the protection of yourself, because you have to protect yourself in order to protect other people, I think. And I think the first one, if like the two others weren't included, the first one is important because it shows that you can protect yourself and that the vaccines are safe and effective to protect yourself. And then you can transfer that to, oh, I can protect others if I keep myself like healthy and safe. Because if you're not healthy, then you can't protect others. So I think my first one.
Okay.
Good job, Savannah. That was like Mrs. Pritchard said, you were very comfortable and natural. Your delivery was great. It was classic Savannah. Let me put it.
Thank you.
It was great.
Thank you.
I have a question. I have heard this argued from a couple of different points, and I was wondering if you came across those points in your research. One of the arguments against vaccination is because it can lead to autism and things like that. The other argument that I've heard against vaccination from the religious aspect is that the development of some vaccines have come from embryonic stem cells or something like that, and so you had to kill an embryo to do the research, so they're opposed to the whole vaccine as a whole. Did you come across any of those or anything?
I actually did the autism thing. I had actually thought about arguing that point. And what I read about that is that the guy who, or the doctor or whatever he was, who made that statement, actually, they retracted that statement in like that book or paper, and he actually got fired for making that statement. So it was a false claim, and there's been thousands of like studies done that make that claim, and it's false.
Good.
So he made that false claim. And then I saw the like where you had to kill like baby or
the embryos.
the embryo. That's the word, embryos. And I saw something where that like had been used before, but then I saw some stuff where like that was false too. So I didn't really touch on that. I mainly looked at the autism thing because I thought about using it.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah.
Good. Your points were, good job on your points and everything. That you argued it well.
Thank you.
Yeah. Perhaps you more than any other, it's neat to see your personality come out in your presentation. You've got such a neat personality. I'm glad we were able to see that. I know that you ran across a lot of things. So you come to class the next day and said, "You're not going to believe what I just found." Kind of illuminate to the others. What are some of the most surprising things or some of the most interesting things you came across?
Okay, my favorite, and I think one of y'all saw me smiling, is the formaldehyde. That was so interesting to me because I told Mr. Lawrence, I said, "Mr. Lawrence, they use it in the preservation of dead bodies," because he commented that on my paper, and I'm Googling it, and I'm just like, what? And then it said it never exceeds a certain amount, and then your body naturally produces it. And I was like, okay, that's better. So that was really interesting. I think that was my most interesting thing. And then just like the cancers, that was crazy to see that these diseases that you don't think are like too serious actually are the main causes of certain cancers. But I don't think anything can top the formaldehyde one. That was just crazy.
Well, I know you're glad this is over, but you've acquitted yourself quite well. That was a really, really nice presentation. You did a great job. You have come miles from when this year started.
Yes, so many tears.
Yeah, well, they have paid great dividends. That was a really, really good way for you to cap this thing off.
Thank you.
Great job. If nobody else has any questions, we will call it a wrap.
Well done,
See you
Savannah.
later, Savannah.